2013 meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council is in session. Let's all join together in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now let's all join together in a moment of silence. Thank you. Council, the agenda is before you. What is your pleasure?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
We have a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We have an agenda, a very brief one, I might say, and we all have other things to do, so we'll work ourselves right on through it expeditiously. And Council, I must say again to you, I've been watching the TV of these meetings, and it's necessary that each of us speak directly into the microphone. The people are going to hear what goes on. We have a consent agenda, tab 1. Any questions at all? Hearing no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion that we approve the consent.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Planning Board. Good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Council. I have a brief report this morning, 2 items. The first item is at our meeting last night, we elected officers. Planning Board has to re-elect officers every year. I was re-elected as chair, and Mike Flores was re-elected as vice chair. The other thing that I want to report on is ZTA 13-05. It's temporary uses, and the Planning Board recommends approval of ZTA 1305, and also in that approval is the finding that it is consistent with our land use plan. And that's my report. Any questions?
For the benefit of the audience, could you state the change that you're proposing?
The ZTA 1305, the change is to add to section 36, 168, temporary uses, to add a 4th item that reads, and let me just read it, it's self-explanatory. Within any zoning district, the use of land by the town or its agents to support the construction, repair, replacement, renovation, remodel, rehabilitation, and maintenance of town-owned, leased, operated, or maintained facilities, which include but are not limited to buildings, streets, utilities, beach accesses, multi-use paths, and canals for a temporary period which reasonably corresponds to the duration of the project. Basically, it allows the town to use things on a temporary basis. And in the past, the town has been using properties that it owns or maintains on a temporary basis, but there was nothing in the ordinances to really permit that. And this corrects that oversight.
Any questions of the chairman? I don't hear any questions of the chairman. This requires a public hearing,
It does require a public hearing.
and we will I'll set that public hearing for our first meeting in September. That's time enough, isn't it, Madam Clerk, to do the necessary advertising? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Public comment? We have no business on the agenda. New business, council rules of procedure. This is on the agenda at my request, as you might recall from last meeting. And it has occurred to me over time that perhaps council has a responsibility to look at our rules of procedure based on our experience, and I'm talking about this council. Some of us have been on it 4 years, some only 2. Some have been on it many more before. But to look at these rules of procedure and see if there's anything that merits attention. The rules, as you know, are in your book at tab something. You know where it is better than I. As one of the things that has come to me, one of the thoughts that's come to me is that it's just a bare statement, and it needs a little background. And I have been personally working on what I'm calling a preamble to these rules of procedure that set the stage for the rules. And frankly, I'd hoped that maybe I'd had something to share with you this morning, but after 10 or 12 drafts, I'm still not ready. But I thought we could turn our attention to the individual rules of procedure, and any of you have any concerns or suggestions for improving them, clarification, let's all share them together. Anybody have any thoughts? I know Jody does, because I'm looking over there, and she's got notes made.
Well, some of them I wanted to clarify with Peter, just to make sure they're legally something we want to put in it. But for example, we talk about minutes. Under section 10, page 3, we talk about accurate minutes and the fact that minutes of closed sessions may be concealed by action of the council. A couple of years ago, we passed a resolution on how we would process the closed minutes. And I guess the question I'd have is, should we put some general statement in there in what that resolution says, since it's not something we have readily available to us when we're talking about it? And it would let every other council in the future know that. And I don't need an answer right now, Peter. It's just a question I have that maybe we should perhaps include something. All it says at the moment is sealed minutes may be withheld from public inspection so long as public inspection would frustrate the purpose of the closed session. I didn't know whether we ought to put any more detail in it as to the way we discussed it or what. That's one of the questions I had. Also, under page 4, under appointments, it talks about making appointments and that the presiding officer shall open the floor to nominations, and that's fine, because obviously that's what we want to do. But what's happened most frequently in the past is someone, for example, maybe the planning director, gives us a list of names and we decide how to vote on it. Should we modify it? I'm not saying change it. I just think it's something that we should be looking at. And there are a couple of typos along the way. Going down to the next one, section 5. Our practice has been that excuse me, section 15, I'm sorry.
15.
Right, section 15. This has to do with public addressing the council. And whatever is there is accurate, but it has been our policy for some time that the council does not immediately reply to the public comments. We welcome them, we want them, but we take them under advisement. Should something be stated there to say that? I don't know.
I made an exception to that the last time. I did respond directly to a gentleman. I think I prefaced it with the remark that normally we do not respond.
You did.
Well, I responded, and I was in error. What I told him we had in our list of repairs, once I went back and checked carefully, it isn't in the list of repairs. So I'm trying to repair the damage I did by talking with the town manager to see if the list can be upgraded. And I will clear it with the chap who spoke to us about it.
And along the way, I've got a couple of other questions that I just, as I say, I have questions, I just want to explore them, whether we want to do this, want to include them, or whether we legally should include or change the wording, or does this cover the questions I have?
Say again.
I said, the other comments that I haven't mentioned to you, I just really wanted to qualify it with Peter from his legal background, from the standpoint of, does this cover the question I have? Or do we need to make some kind of a modification? And if he agrees we should, I will certainly present it to you and to the council members.
Anyone else have a comment?
The only comment that I have is, again, on section 15, that public address to the council. In reading that first sentence, am I to understand that the comments, if you're having a comment that is not on the agenda for the public hearing at the meeting, is the only time you can make a comment, that you can't make a comment outside the public hearing, that you must be sworn in to make a comment?
What page are you on?
It's
Section 15.
The one you just talked about.
That's public comment, it's not public hearing. Hold on a minute.
It does say public hearing at that meeting.
So
Public
I read
hearing
that
is-
2 or 3 times, and I'm still just a little bit confused. If
No,
I read-
the one I was talking about was section 15 on page 4, the
Yes.
bottom of the page. This one is public hearings that I have, says section 8
Well, I'm sorry, the one I'm talking about then is section 15.
on page 3.
Public address to council.
Yeah, but there is a public hearing section.
As,
Talks about hearings.
as I understand it, the way we've practiced it in the past, if someone signs up for public comment and is discovered that they are speaking to the matter on which we're going to hold a public hearing, that I invite them to defer to the public hearing. I have done that in the past
Okay,
a couple of times,
okay.
just to clarify.
Which puts it
But
back to the other public hearing section.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
But if we needed clarification of wording there, Larry, give us something, but not now. I'm not asking for anything right now, but I really want hope, not what I want. What I hope is that as a result of this discussion this morning, you individual council members will document your unease or any changes that you think is appropriate, and get them to them so that we can discuss each of them in a formal way at a future meeting.
Should we send these comments to you as we have them? Or how do you want to handle that?
Please get them to me, or to Sheila, and she can get them to me. And depending on what comes in, I will schedule with the clerk and see if we can get it on the agenda. We have anything else to say about this matter? Anybody? Mr. Manager, we're ready for your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just reporting to you that the contract with Barnhill Contracting for street repairs for this fiscal year, out of the priorities that you set, and recall that we did exclude two that will be bid out subsequently, has been signed, and the begin date will be September 1 and the end date will be November 30th. So recall, these are repairs, various repairs around town, and they'll be handled systematically by Barnhill during that time period. Wanted to report to you as well that our agreement with the architect for the garage building and training room for the police department that you approved in the budget for this year has been signed, and we're in the process of putting the design out to various area builders as an informal bid process. So hopefully that'll be coming in pretty shortly, and we'll be able to get started on that very shortly.
Who is the contract? Who is the architect?
Chris Nassim, Beacon Architectural here in Southern Shores.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
He's a resident.
Yes, sir. He's
Yes.
a resident of Southern Shores. And
Great.
we've been working with him about, I guess, over a month now.
Great.
It's
not going to be a red building, is it?
No, sir. Chief,
Chris Nason is the gentleman that owns the red house at the intersection of Trinity and Gravy Pond.
Ohio State House.
Sorry.
That's fine. Did want to report to you that the Division of Coastal Management replied back to us last week. They're still processing the permit modification for the town's CAMA major permit for the dredging project. Hopefully this week we will see the modification. At that point, we'll be meeting with the dredging contractor so that he can go ahead and make plans to mobilize for the upcoming dredge period, which, as you know, the official date to begin would be October 1. And of course, he'll be mobilizing prior to that date. Don't have any firm dates on that, other than we're anxiously awaiting the permit modification.
Is there any hitch that we know about, or is it just government time taking?
I think it's government at its best, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
We don't know of any hitch, and the agent at DCM in Morehead City says he foresees no problems.
Okay.
I did want to discuss two matters with you from a philosophy standpoint. One is our pothole management policy, and I wanted to bring this out for me to just candidly tell you what our administrative policy is with potholes, because we are getting constant phone calls of potholes all over town that we're trying to, of course, address with the current year's budget, that are not included in the capital improvement plan, but are systematic repairs that we normally do during the year. As calls come in, we report those to Public Works, and we actually rank those, or prioritize or triage, whatever the word you like to use, based on public safety. And as you know, there are a lot of potholes or a lot of anomalies in the streets in town that we try to address, but we try to do it strictly on public safety. And we do get a lot of calls. Everybody's got a pothole on their street, a favorite pothole, as we call it. So as they come in, we do triage them, and some of them get taken care of immediately. Some of them may not be taken care of for a couple of weeks, and some of them may continue to be on the list until we actually get to them using resources that are available to do that. As you recall, this year, the council approved a larger budget for street repair in the Public Works budget, and we're using that money to address these potholes. There may be some savings in the capital reserve fund during the year that we may foresee as we bid these contracts out, and possibly we could request a transfer of that more into that line item for Public Works. But I did want to give you a kind of an idea on how we go about addressing individual callers, and it's basically triage based on public safety. Some of them may sit there because they don't not considered to be a threat to public safety. They are an eyesore, et cetera. So, but that is how we address them. And obviously, if I get a call from an individual council member, then that would elevate the importance in my mind to looking at the pothole. Still, though, we look at it from a public safety standpoint, trying to manage this budget and trying to use the resources that we have. So I wanted to try to answer any questions that you may have on that policy as well, but that's basically how we do it. I know there are potholes all over town on some streets, but we basically have to do it that way from a time and resource priority.
They're generally described as potholes, though truly not all of them. Each and every one of them is a pothole. We find that people think that a declivity of any kind in the road is a pothole. And I guess it's all right if people think that way. Anyway, in any event, they're calling our attention to the fact that they see a problem. You do have, manager, you have authority in the budget ordinance to move funds within a department.
That's correct.
And you can use that full authority, and only when you exceed it would you have to come to us with a budget amendment. So I would encourage you to not be shy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No other questions. I'll go on to my next the last topic. I did want to bring up a matter that you may see getting more attention in the news, and just make us aware of the fact that the county will be going about now trying to analyze a way to distribute the occupancy tax funds for beach nourishment to those declared projects that some of the municipalities have indicated an interest in. As you know, Southern Shores is not one of those, but Duck has a certain distance of its beach that it plans on nourishing in the next year. Kildover Hills has a section of its beach that it plans on nourishing in the next year. And Kitty Hawk still is, of course, attempting to determine what its project will be for flood control, as it describes it. As you know, the occupancy tax money is distributed by the Board of Commissioners for beach nourishment, and it will be done so under some plan that'll be derived at to help nourish these beaches. The way we understand it from a manager standpoint, each of the municipalities will be required to have skin in the game, i.e. it have its own money as part of the project as well. In discussions with the managers and with the county manager, of course, we have not declared a project, and I just wanted to alert the councilman and councilwoman to the fact that we may see this come out in the news very shortly, that a certain municipality will be getting certain funds for its nourishment project, but they will have to put up their own resources for the project as well. So I just wanted to alert council to that's going to be a high profile item that'll be in the news, I think, very shortly. So if there are any questions, I'll try to answer them, but obviously the county has not come up with a formula or a plan yet for the distribution to those individual towns for a portion of their cost.
The thing that comes to my mind, or the question that comes to my mind, is what is defined as beach nourishment. I know that Kitty Hawk, for example, has, I think they are letting a contract, or maybe have already let it, for a pumping station, one pumping station between the highways. And I know that they have identified sites for 4 other pumping stations. And what I don't know is, does occupant tax money cover that? Is an activity like that part of beach nourishment? Do you know, Jody?
I know that the laws that put the tax in place spell out and define what the uses are. I don't remember that as being one of them. But I think that's what we should look at, because that will dictate, it said what the funds would be used for, and how they would be used, like beach crossovers, you know, that sort of thing, in addition to the protecting the dunes and so forth.
Well, does it include sand fencing and planting?
Yeah, it does include those items.
Yep.
And we have a program for sand fencing and planting?
That is available to us, Mr. Mayor. This past year, we have not done, since the last hurricane, we did not do sand fencing because of the timing of being so late in the season. I made the management decision not to invest the occupancy tax funds into doing it that late. We're constantly taking a look at the beach to see how much dry beach there is, if there is sufficient room for sand fencing. A lot of homeowners actually did it themselves early last winter. And it does include plantings. The problem we've had in the past is distance, whether it's on somebody's private property or on the public beach, has been the challenge we've had in the past. So we've taken another look at it this coming year, but that is available to us.
Do we have a plan to fence this fall?
I do not have an immediate plan to fence this fall. We're still trying to, basically looking at what's there, dry sand versus wet sand, and we're still looking at it. We made a commitment to try to look at it through this summer and just take a look-see, because last time we were actually putting fences on private property. Storm got it. We were being asked to come back and put it back on private property, and we didn't do that. But I don't have a plan in place yet to put any sand fencing up for this year.
The money that was available to us for that was the interest from the sales tax that was later repealed. In the discussions that you're hearing and talking with the managers about, are they including that sales tax fund in the discussions of the distribution, or are they still holding that separate? At one point, I believe it was booked and accounted separately.
I don't know the answer to that. We haven't discussed that at the manager's level. That would be
Okay.
something the county would be looking at. I don't know.
Well, we have not had a Shorelines Management Committee meeting in months and months. And the last time they set up the discussions, they at least came to that committee for advice. It's still the decision of the commissioners. But we have not had a meeting where they discussed what they're doing right at the moment. Interesting.
Brings to mind to me, Council, do we need a plan? If we don't have something in place, and we have a plan, then we don't share. Strikes me. And don't ask me what a plan would include.
May I answer that?
Yeah.
Ever since I've been on the Shorelines Commission, that's the thing I've been fighting for, is a plan. And I always thought it was better to have a county-wide plan because we're talking about a county-wide fund. But I still think we as a town should be taking a look, because it was a surprise to Duck when they had that breakthrough, if you want to call it that. It could happen to us. I certainly don't expect it. I don't know that it's going to happen, but I think we should have something in mind that says this is what we would do. And the very least of it probably is like this fencing and the plantings. We've got 2 or 3, and you know where they are, Peter, the weak spots, if you want to call them that. They're hot spots, down closest to the pier. Is there something special we should be doing about that, or planning about that for ourselves? I just don't.
In my mind, I'm not an engineer, but the only 2 things, it's either sand fencing and planting or actual beach nourishment. And in that particular location, there's nothing to sand fence, basically.
There's no dune, if you will.
There's nothing, and that's what we got in the hot spots
Right.
as well. There's nothing to sand fence. Basically, it's an aesthetic, it turns out to be an aesthetic thing for the homeowner and of no use to the public beach in those locations. So I think the question is, and I have consistently portrayed this to the county manager, that my sense from this council is there's no urge to nourish the beach here, at least for this fiscal year. And if that's different, I can certainly take that back. But I think it's either one or the other would be the only plan we would have. I mean, we participated, our beaches were surveyed in the preliminary engineering phase of the duck plan.
Right.
And we have access to that data that shows whatever movement is occurring with the mean high water markings, but that's what we have at this point.
Is there anything within that we could look at for preserving dunes if there's no beach nourishment? Or are we as preserved, quote unquote, as we can be at this point? Do you think?
I mean, in my knowledge, the only thing we could do legally within the Coastal Area Management Act is actually put up sand fencing if it's appropriate.
Right.
And I will say that 2 years ago, we did a lot of sand fencing that just kind of followed years past that turned out really it wasn't appropriate and was on property where we didn't have easements, et cetera. So we kind of decided to take a look-see, and then the storm came so late last year that it wasn't feasible to do anything after that.
Right.
But we continue to look at the feasibility of sand fencing and plantings, no question, but just in some locations, it's not feasible on the public beach. Beach nourishment, I think it's just, it has to come like it came to the other towns. I mean, do we have a townwide interest in nourishing the beaches at that cost? As you know, the other municipalities will be facing raising their skin in the game through tax increases.
Yeah. And that's what bothers me.
If I may, if indeed flood control is an issue that can be addressed with these monies, we do have some flooding problems on NC 12. We have in the past had situations in other parts of town on that side, in particular Seacrest Village. Something that's always worried me, and it's not occurred in the last 30, 40 years. Obviously in Kitty Hawk you have ocean overwash, ponding, or actually flooding of all the way to the bypass, that type of thing. So it's very understandable what they want to try to do there. We have been lucky in Southern Shores, we haven't had anything but minor overwash, but we do have, because we have the same situation here, we have a low area between two dunes with an ocean on the other side. And if you go back and look at David Stick's book, Ash Wednesday, and look at what happened in our area, which was not a town at the time, essentially from where Southern Shores Realty is now, all the way to Plover, the only means of access to any of the properties, including Seacrest Village all the way to Plover, was by boat. NC 12 was totally inundated. There was no other access. There was basically water trapped dune to dune. I don't remember how many days, but eventually what they had to do was bulldoze gaps in the dune line to drain the area. So it's happened before. It hasn't happened in recent history, but it is something that has occurred here. And like I said, it's been sort of a pet worry of mine. Every time we have a storm, I run up and down the road looking for overwash. And there are a couple of areas here where we've had some. So, you know, perhaps a study, a look, I don't know if monies are available to look at something like this. I think that we should consider it.
Just a tactical reply on one thing. Called last storm, we had a near overwash in that general area of Pelican Watch. And it's my hope that if Kitty Hawk, of course, does do a townwide nourishment project, all indications are there will be a section of taper on the north end that hopefully that would come into the town of Southern Shores on the taper part. So that would be our hope. Don't know what their project will be, but if it is a townwide nourishment project, at least on the north end, that hopefully that would taper off onto our beach. And that was the last overwash, I believe, in that general area.
Well, I mean, I think sand fencing is the minimal aspect of all this. We have a planning board, we have a planner. I see no problems why we can't have a plan. Questions like, for example, what do you do when half your beach washes away and you want to apply for FEMA funds and they don't give you FEMA funds because you have a private beach? What would be the plan be at that point? Do we explore that issue? Larger pictures like that, not just maybe an overwash here, overwash there. I mean, we are a beach town on a beach. The propensity to flood exists. The propensity for storms to come in exists. The beach washing way exists. Dune washing way exists. What is our plan if all that happens? Do we have one? And I suggest that we don't have a plan. And maybe it's time that we have something written down as a plan just to focus in on those topics, to at least put them out there and try to see, is there anything we can do about any of this stuff to ease it? So I'm all for, I mean, I hate to put work on people, but I'm all for giving it as a plan out there to go put things together and see what you can come up with as a planning board and as a planner, and see what happens. And if we get more information, not just do we put up sand fencing or, you know, I mean, but in the bigger picture, what do we do? What happens?
As a minimum, the plan will perhaps document where and the extent we do have the most immediate potential for a problem in our town, like at Pelican Watch, like at the bird crossovers, purple martin, mockingbird. I have, for a long time, been very comfortable. I haven't been very comfortable. I've been comfortable that Dr. Pilkey had it nailed pretty good when he talked about how fortunate we were in Southern Shores to have the substrata that we have under our beaches, which adds to the stability. So, but still, when I see what happened to duck, they were comfortable too. Duck was comfortable too, and lost 1.5 miles or so of dune in 3 days.
I also think there's another aspect that we should look at as the individuals that are supposed to be taking care of the financial aspects of this town, and that is also to see what are the long-term financial effects upon our citizenry with all the raising of the taxes by all the surrounding towns in order that they can gather their money together so they can put sand on their beaches. How does it affect our sharing? How does it affect us in our pockets? And what is the long-term aspects of that? Especially when you start dealing with the fact that there's a maintenance concept to that replenishment that has to be taken care of for futures. What does that affect us financially, and what happens to us in that respect? And are there any counters to that we can do? I think that might not necessarily be a plan, but that be at least a portion of data that shows roughly what is happening, which I don't think we have really a long-term outlook on what would happen there. It's nice to hear that Kitty Hawk wants to do this and Kildover Hills wants to do that, et cetera. What is the long-term cost to us? And I think we should know that as best as we can.
I don't know if that's of any immediate great help to you, Mr. Manager, but
I will just say my plan is to monitor how this process is put together and see who gets what for what. And to also, from a tactical standpoint, the town planner and I do obviously look at the hot spots. And the hot spot to me are places where, as you say, Mr. Mayor, the beach is going to change, as Dr. Pilkey said, but the hot spots to me are places where a structure that's part of the town's tax base cannot be moved back using that investor's funding. It physically cannot be moved back anymore. So that would be the area of Purple Martin.
Typically, those kind of streets, Purple
Right.
Martin, Mockingbird.
So there we would lose the tax base. And that's similar to what happened to Duck in its area. Cannot move those houses back. You could look at Nagtown and Nags Head, for over 100 years, the structures were moved back by the owners. There was room to move back. And they did that using their own fund, the private funds. And here, we would be in danger of losing that tax base. Those are the areas that we are high on our radar screen to look at. So at this point, I really want to monitor how this whole process lays out for this year. If Kitty Hawk does come up with a project, how is the money distributed? What type of ratio, i.e. or formula, is used? Because that'll tell the tale for what the taxpayers in those municipalities have to do, or the taxpayers in the municipal service districts as they declare those. Kitty Hawk is still studying what it's going to do about that. A municipal service district. I believe Kildover Hills and Duck are clearly going to have their municipal service districts.
And then there's the aspect of the public trust and the state's concepts of public trust and what they want to do about that and how our relationship exists with that. So that's a whole other thing to monitor and look at as it comes down the pike, if it does ever.
Well, you raised a good question too about beach access, and that has not come back up with the county funds in discussion. I think they can basically establish what policy they want to establish, but if we ever get state or federal funding, obviously that will be a major question on the access part. The actual public trust beach, when it widens, that's going to remain in the public trust, no matter where a landowner claims his lot is. But
The county did speak to the access the last time before Kildover Hills went into this project, as to how it would be included and how it would be implemented. But since these other two projects were added, that can all change.
that's right. Yes, ma'am. So I will, what I'm committed to do is we will stay on it and keep the council briefed on changes or whatnot. But I did want to just alert you, because it'll start coming out in the news very shortly, I'm sure, as these plans are made for these projects anyway in the other towns. And that's my report, Mr. Mayor.
So the question still arises, do we want to be proactive with a plan, or do we want to be reactive and have no plan?
And well, from a management standpoint, I have to put it back to council. Is council ready to raise taxes to pay for a nourishment project? And that's my bottom line. If we were to go into a retreat or whatever, or today talk about it, are we ready to do that? Certainly, if there's funding there, everybody likes a wide beach. That's what I always say. Everybody loves a wide beach.
My
But are we-
personal reaction to that is, we've got this dredging project we need to get finished. And we need to monitor this. We need to be prepared for anything that might happen, but I'm not sure I'm ready to sit down yet and spend the time and money for a plan laid out to that extent.
No, I'm not even talking about dredging, I'm just talking about a plan of what do you do when, when calamities strike and what goes on. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Manager. I'm Mr. Mayor, aren't I? I don't have anything, council, except I would encourage each of you to really spend some time on the rules of procedure and share with me your thoughts or concerns if you have any, or share with me your thoughts that you don't have any concerns. Councilman Lahan?
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Councilman Sanders?
Nothing else.
Councilman Kowalski?
I have nothing, thank you.
Madam Pro Tem?
I have one thing. At the last meeting, I mentioned that the Tourism Board was going to have a public meeting to discuss the proposed uses for the event site, former Windmill Point site, and that meeting has been set for the August 28th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Comfort Inn North. And they will be opening it up. They plan to make a presentation to review what they're proposing and looking at, and then just let people ask questions and comments like we've seen in similar meetings. This will not be the last public meeting. There will be another one as they finalize the plans, but this is more to get public input. That's all I have.
Thank you, ma'am. There being no other business to come before us this morning, council, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We're adjourned.